Hello, and welcome back to your daily slash nightly, okay, maybe once a week, like insomnia cure. I know that these videos probably can amount to about that. The good news is you have a stop button and you can come back to it if you decide. But as you know, we just talked about getting from Aristotle to the ancient Roman times. So let's talk about that. And I really want to focus on Cicero in this particular part of things. So let's talk about Cicero. Who was Cicero? Apparently, he was the greatest orator of all times. That is according to Quintilian, who, lived like 100 years after him, and it was about 100 CE. So, really, like 1900 years ago? So, I don't know. Maybe between now and then we've had a better order. I don't know. But what I do know is that Cicero wrote the first handbook or the first textbook for public speaking. Here he takes everything that Aristotle said and organizes it into the five canons, which, as I mentioned, are invention, arrangement, style, memory, delivery. Now, I want to be clear about this. First of all, this does not mean that delivery is not important. Okay, these are the five canons, meaning you cannot practice rhetoric without all five. Okay, all five have to be present. He puts them in order of importance in the sense of if you don't have this, you can't have that. So if you don't have invention, you have nothing to arrange. If you have something to arrange, you should know how to present it. If you know how to present it, you should do it in a formal sense that rehearses sort of the tradition of speaking. And you should make sure that this is memoria, by the way, if you haven't figured it out, what you should be doing is representing your information very, very well. That's what memoria is about. It's not about memorizing so much as it is about making sure that what information you're giving is as accurate as possible. That is to say that you remember the main point, the main idea, and you're able to get that across to your audience. And then delivery. If you don't have the first four, you've got nothing to deliver. So why would I worry about, I don't know, being able to speak if I don't have anything to say? And the answer is you wouldn't. So I remember when I first started teaching, I had a student in a basic public speaking course at Miami of Ohio who said, "But Dr. Dudash, my speeches were better than anybody else's in this room, and you gave me a C." And I said, "Your delivery is fantastic. You keep me engaged. I enjoy listening to you. You've got a great voice. You're like a football coach. You're so inspirational, but you're not saying anything." And they just really were unhappy with me because those people who had content, even if their delivery wasn't that great, got, better grades sometimes. Why? Because that content part is important. And that's what invention is. Invention is not just picking a topic. It's not saying, what do I want to talk about? Do I want to teach people how to make bread, or do I want to teach them how to tie their shoes? No, that's not what that's about. Invention is about coming up with everything that you want to say that you need to get across to the audience, not just about a subject matter, but everything about that subject matter. And that's important. Within invention are the artificial and inartificial proofs. Because in invention, you have to use the inartificial proofs that you have in order to speak and to develop them to reason with your audience vis-a-vis the artificial proofs. So a human being takes the inartificial proofs that we have, the raw data, the science, if you will, the empirical things that we have, and we say, what can we do with that? What does that mean to us? How do we use that? And what message do we want to send in order to get that across? So invention is not just, oh, hey, what's my topic going to be for this paper? Invention is everything involved in that process. Cicero, are you ready for this one? The sun is going down as I'm speaking, and you can tell on the video. I apologize for that. Cicero says that before you speak, you should know absolutely everything about your topic. Now, how many of us can truly say that when we speak, we know everything about that topic. It doesn't happen that often. What we can say is that we know everything we need to know to express in truth, honestly, an idea to an audience. Okay? But Cicero believed that rhetoric should be in our education system. In fact, it's the whole point of the education system. There used to be what we called 5 R's, not 3. Reading, writing, arithmetic. Only one of those actually starts with an R, but we called them the 3 R's. Okay, but that's not very useful really as a mnemonic device. I guess it works, but it's kind of silly. But one of those other 2 was rhetoric. So it used to be that our entire educational system was in fact based on the idea that rhetoric was a core educational subject matter. So if that's the case, then what happened? Because we stopped teaching rhetoric and we started teaching what we like to call the harder sciences. We started teaching what we call sort of the information. We're not educating so much as giving out information. I'm going to turn a light on because this is driving me nuts. So pause and think about that for a second. I don't think it's best for me to talk while I'm gone. So give me 1 second here. That's the one problem with teaching from home and teaching online is that the sun goes down and it totally ruins everything you've set up, right? So anyway, you can still see how tired I am. It doesn't really matter. Thank you for that moment. Now, hopefully this is a little bit better. So Cicero said that our education should start, guess when? That's right, in infancy. Your training for rhetoric should start in infancy. Seriously? He literally says that the person feeding the baby, the wet nurses, better be able to speak well. I guess women had to be taught, right? Then, at least the wet nurses had to be taught rhetoric, had to speak well. So I don't know if you've ever heard somebody with a baby, but like the new rage is that you don't talk baby talk. You don't look at them and go, goo, 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 ga, ga, ga. We don't do that anymore. They did that when I was born, but we don't do that anymore. And the reason for that is partially because we've learned that they need the mimicry in order to be able to speak. And so if you talk to them in baby talk, they're going to give you baby talk back. And that's not good. And that sounded like a bad rap song. Point is, it's not good, right? We don't want our children being taught to speak in baby voice back to us. Now, I don't know if any of you have kids, but I do have a couple that I've adopted and that have just become my children by virtue of my husband. So bonus kids, if you will. And they apparently clearly were taught baby talk when they were a kid. You can tell that they were taught baby talk. What's interesting is one of the things that I can also tell is that my brother's kids, of which he has 5, because he's crazy, between the ages of 9 and 19 right now, he never did that with them. He and his wife said, we're never going to do baby talk. We're not going to do that, goo goo gaga thing. He said, we're going to use real words. And in fact, we use some Czech words, and we use some Spanish words because they're exposed to Spanish a lot and because we're Czechoslovakian. So, we teach them a few words in Czech, but for the most part, they're being taught proper English from the time they were born. And not taught like, let's sit down and talk about grammar when they're 4 months old, just that you talk to them as if they're human beings, because they are. And by doing this, they will mimic or imitate you. And yes, it was Aristotle who said imitation is the best form of flattery. And Cicero takes that and says, mimicry is only the first step in understanding a skill, right? So he begins with his discussion about education. That's where he starts first when he talks about rhetoric. He does not talk about rhetoric as we think of it, like flowery language that's useless. He doesn't talk about it that way until he gets to style, which is the obvious thing, right? Think about it. If you have nothing to say, why would you be speaking? You never are not speaking. There's always a reason for it. Whether that reason is because you want to engage people to get them to do something, whether you're trying to convince them that something is right, wrong, good, bad, or otherwise, or you're trying to convince them that something is true, right? These three things. I just had a contractor at my house who's working on my father-in-law's lake house, and we were talking about the fact that I have a political sign in front of my house, and I said, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to take that down, because he and I are on opposite sides of the political spectrum, but we enjoy each other a great deal and respect each other. He goes, yeah, I figure there's a lot of variety out there in our viewpoints. I'm okay with it. I more have a bigger problem with the Steelers sign, right? And that's really like the attitude that most of the time people have towards politics. Okay, no, that's totally a lie. They do not. They are like hardcore. If you're not on my side, you're against me, which is silly. If everybody's working towards a democracy and a republic, then why the heck would you need to be that combative? You wouldn't. And if you have something to say, and it's important enough, then you're going to say it in a way that's civil by everybody's standards, because that's naturally the way that rhetoric works. And that's what Aristotle was trying to say too. If you're speaking the truth to the best of your ability and you're considering your audience, then you're always going to be using rhetoric in the proper way, utilizing rhetoric, period, and it will be a civil action. All right. Now, I told you there was going to be some fun stuff in the Cicero thing, not nearly as fun as Plato. But Cicero is almost just as hard to read as Plato is. I find dialogues and these winding narratives with all these names to be very, very difficult. And if you don't know the reference of one person, then you're not going to understand the entire thing. Like at some point he says, now Plato is influenced by so-and-so, and then that person was influenced by so-and-so. Therefore, Plato must mean this. And it's like, what? I don't understand who any of those people are. But just like today, they wrote down who the people at the time were. I say write down, that, well, maybe in Rome, but that wasn't really happening. Most of this is oral tradition still up to this point. So most of this is coming from students of Cicero or Quintilian, who told us what Cicero said as well. So we have like very, very small bits and pieces of writing, actual writing from the ancient Greeks, not much at all, obviously. We have a little more from the Romans, but not much. We only have, one thing from Isocrates, for example. But we have like what these entire volumes seem to be from the Romans. And part of that, I think, is because their students sort of got together. And so are any of these things written by any one person named Cicero? Don't know. What I do know is that it's credited to him. And so that's another way that we build this up, right? We hear stories or we hear information and we share it with other people, usually orally, if you think about it, or in the written form. And either way, we're practicing rhetoric. And then that gets folded into our knowledge, our culture, our public discourse. So here's the thing. That means there's a great deal of responsibility when we speak and when we write. The engagement of rhetoric as a practice is extremely important to be truthful. Because let's say, for example, that I gave you some bad advice. Well, you know what? Let's give you good advice. If you want to succeed in Dr. Dudash's class, your best bet is to make sure that she knows who you are. So engage her. Make sure she knows who you are. Really hard to do online. So she'll work hard at it if you'll work hard at it. Fantastic. Now, you say that to somebody who says it to somebody else, who says it to somebody else. And pretty soon, I've got people acting up in my classes, asking to leave, telling me that they can't do something because it gets my attention. They know I know their name. That's not the intent at all, right? The intent is that I know your name for good reasons. And you may think that would never happen, but believe me, it does. Okay? There are times where people are like, well, I just heard that you like it when we talk to you. Yeah, but I'm not going to sit on the phone with you like I'm your best friend and listen to your problems. That's not my job. Sorry, everyone. That's not my job, right? I don't want to know you for the wrong reasons, but possibly. And this isn't like just the game of telephone where we mishear and misconstrue. It's because the intent of the message gets lost if people are not incredibly careful at telling the whole message, which is why enthymemes, even though the most common argument that we have, the most common type of speaking that we have is enthymemes, enthymematic. It really cuts out a lot. On the one hand, I don't need to come up to you and say, it's, let's see, it's after 6. We ate lunch at 1. My tummy is a little grumbly, which I believe means it has air in it because it needs food. Therefore, want to go to lunch? We don't go through all that. We just say, yo, Jeet Jet, no, want to get lunch, right? Because we don't need to go through all the premises of the syllogism before we get to the question or the claim that we're making, right? That's fine in certain situations where everybody understands the premises, where everyone agrees on the premises, enthymemes work great. It's when we work with complex arguments that people do not want to bother trying to find the full intent. I think it was actually in my political communication class. I don't think it was in any of my rhetoric classes this year, but so far. But somebody wrote, I wonder how many people actually click on articles that they see about their candidate, their preferred candidate, to actually get the information before they just pass it on or reiterate the tagline or the thumbnail or just hit share without reading the article. And the answer is far too many. The reason for that is that even less than in Cicero's time do we take the time to learn everything that we need to know about an argument. If an author spends 32 pages making an argument, there's probably a reason why those 32 pages are there. Otherwise, you just write a sentence and be done with it. I'd be published all the time. I'm giving you freaking gold right now, right? I'm just kidding. The point is that if we talked and engaged each other in enthymemes all the time, we do that. It's because we assume you know the premises. What happens is that over time, people stop thinking about what premises we actually agree on. They assume certain things to be true that aren't, or they assume that we agree on things that we don't. Back in 2001, when the Twin Towers fell, there were people saying, you're either with us or against us. You either support the fight in Afghanistan or you are not American, you're not a patriot. And there's a lot of argument to be had there because those assume some premises that maybe we shouldn't assume. For example, an eye for an eye, which some of us have moved past that. We don't do that anymore, right? I don't turn the other cheek either because that hurts. But eye for an eye, not something that all of us engage in. Some of us, not all of us. My other question was, well, how do we know we should bomb Afghanistan? Like, wait, what if we're supposed to bomb Iraq? I mean, if we're going to bomb somebody, make sure you bomb the right person. There were a lot of questions behind those claims, right? A lot of questions that were not answered behind those claims. People just made these judgments. People do it now. You know about it. Twitter is fantastic for this, which, by the way, is one of the reasons why I love Nate Silver. I am not a numbers person. Please don't ask me to add, subtract, balance a checkbook. I'm terrible. I can't even guess numbers when I'm supposed to. I'm lucky I know my age. I can't do numbers. But Nate Silver, that's all he does. And I know enough to be able to read his stuff to say, yes, that is correct. His conclusion is the same as mine. But that's not always the case. There are times where I read Nate Silver's numbers and I'm thinking, I don't think that's what those really say. Because between the raw data that he collects and his claims, there is a world of interpretation that can happen. And he cannot assume that we all agree, but he can say, here's what I've got, here's what the premises are, therefore here's what I think the conclusion is. And most of the time he's right. Not always, but most of the time. Okay, 2016, nobody was right. Sorry. We really screwed that one up. But why? Because we assumed old models. We assumed we knew what would happen in certain situations where numbers were what they were. And there's two problems with that. Number one, it's the fallacy of tradition. Relying on what happened in the past should happen in the future. And that's a terrible thing to do because it usually fails as an argument, and it should. It's a fallacy for a reason. The second problem with it is that if you were Jared Kushner, you were thinking about numbers differently than everybody else. First of all, you accepted the, electoral college as a legitimate thing, which it is. It is for now. We don't always have to have it. We could debate that later, right? He took the electoral college and said, how do I convince enough people that I need for the electoral college? I don't need to win the popular vote to win this election. I just need to win the electoral college. And so we saw Donald Trump going to these random places. Mercer, Pennsylvania. What are you doing there, man? Going to Ambridge, Pennsylvania, saying things like, I'm going to bring the steel mills back. Really? Because our steel mill got converted into a jail a long time ago, and I don't think we're getting that one back. More importantly, there's no more coal in the ground. You've taken it all. There's no more iron here. There's no more coke. There's no more chromium. So how the hell are we going to make steel? You can't do that. You can't just invent it out of the ground, right? I mean, it's a ludicrous argument, but there were so many people who wanted to believe it. They wanted to believe it. And there's a lot of disappointed people in Ambridge and Aliquippa and Rochester and Mercer, Pennsylvania right now, and Bethlehem and Allentown and Scranton. Any of those places where those promises were made, because those promises were based on very faulty premises, right? But it got the people that a strategist needed to get to win the election legitimately. I'm not questioning that. It's a legitimate win if you win by the Electoral College. Me and Hamilton, we're really going to have a debate when I get wherever we go after this. Hopefully I can argue with him because, dude, I so want to do that, right? Like, there are times where we look at documents. They are what they are. The Electoral College is established. I can't argue with a document, but we can argue with the tradition that's been handed down, how we've interpreted these social institutions, how we've created them and maintained them through our rhetoric in our public discourse. So Cicero writes this handbook because he believes that citizens, if they know how to move through the government, they will do it and they will move up. They will be able to better themselves, better their lives, live for the good through the practice of rhetoric, not despite it the way that Plato thought. And Cicero really said, he really said sort of I don't know how to put this in a way that's going to sound sane. He did not say that dialectic was not important. Dialectic, of course, is important. But what he did say was that dialectic isn't necessary if you already know the subject well enough. Does that make sense? So a good person who speaks well is an orator, is a rhetorician, because they will understand what they need to understand in order to analyze a a speech or a written work. Think about that for a second. You have to be knowledgeable to be able to critique or to perform rhetoric. And if you're able to perform it, you're able to critique it, and vice versa. Why shouldn't you be? If I can critique a public speech, I better damn well be able to do it, at least as well, if not better, than the person who's doing it that I'm critiquing. I'm somehow claiming expertise. That expertise has to be backed up with credibility. And for Cicero, that meant good character and competence. And he put that good character first. So it was really an ethics for him, an ethic for him. A good person first, who speaks well second. And in that process, you go into it with the 5 canons, and in that process, you know everything you need to know, and you're able to arrange it in such a way that an audience would understand it because you've put them in the mindset to understand it, and you've delivered it in a way that helps them understand it. And that's the key. Delivery is supposed to help your audience understand your point. Right? That's how it's supposed to work. Arrangement is supposed to lead your audience to the conclusion that you come to. All right. So the 5 canons are important from Cicero. There's no doubt about that. And certainly his 3 levels of style, very big to him. I mean, knowing when to take your toga off, very important stuff. Knowing what color toga to wear, important. But knowing what style to use and engage is important. I mean, if you put an atheist in front of a televangelist, I don't think you're going to have a lot of connection there, right? That's not going to work. So it doesn't matter how engaging the televangelist is. They're not reaching the people at all who don't have any basis in the premises that a televangelist is coming from. It's not going to work. So it doesn't matter how engaging you are. So understanding the appropriateness of your rhetoric to the occasion and to your audience is extremely important for Cicero. That's sort of where he places most of his eggs in a basket, to be honest with you. The 5 canons are just obvious to him. Of course you would know everything about your topic and you would know how to be able to present it, blah, blah, blah. Of course. But while you're doing that, you better darn well be a good person too. And we will find theorists coming up very shortly in our study who really had a real problem with Cicero for that exact fact, the fact that he pointed that out or somehow made being a good person a part of the process of being a good orator or rhetorician. I want to draw your attention also, I was going to say to the 3 types of narrative, but that's actually from Quintilian, so that's good. I can save that for the next one. But I do want to draw your attention to, let's see. You know what? It's also in Quintilian. Who knew? People think that Quintilian is just all about style and not really that important, but he actually was very important. And I'm excited to talk about him next. But for right now, Cicero is laying the foundations, organizing all of the knowledge that we have about rhetoric and the practice of it, explaining how it works in a republic, in a representative democracy, explaining how it works with power that is not centralized, that is decentralized, at least in some way, shape, or form, as it was. And also, he is giving us that student book that you need. Here's how to write a speech. And so if you go into reading Cicero as, here's the things that you need to know in order to give a good speech, you'll actually get something really good out of that. Now, Cicero's writing during the time of the Roman Republic. Quintilian's writing during the time of the Roman Empire. Cicero writes the handbook, he writes the textbook for students. We're going to find out that Quintilian has to write a very different kind of instruction manual. And he has to focus on some different things. Now, enjoy that reading of Cicero. I'm not sure that there's a really easy way to enjoy it, but hopefully you enjoy it. They did edit it down very well for you in the book that we are using as our text. So I think that knowing those things about Cicero, looking at them, looking at them in context to how he used them, is an extremely important part to understanding how rhetoric is going to move from this point all the way through the moderns when we get there by the end of the semester. All right, everybody, questions, comments, concerns, complaints, or threats, send them to me. Talk to you later.